The first time I met the Harringtons, it was in a glass tower that seemed to scrape the clouds. Everything was chrome and white marble and silence. The kind of silence that costs a lot of money. My shoes, which I'd thought were my nicest pair, suddenly felt cheap and loud against their pristine floors. My company, Terrabloom, was my life. It wasn't just a business. It was a promise I'd made to my grandmother. She was the one who taught me how herbs could heal, how the earth gives us everything we need if we just listen. She'd mix clays and oils in her small, sun-drenched kitchen, the air thick with the smell of rosemary and lavender. Her hands, wrinkled and wise, would create balms that soothed my childhood scrapes and creams that made my mother's skin glow. When she passed, she left me her box of recipes, written in her spidery, elegant script. Terrabloom was born from that box. I started in my own kitchen, just like her. I sold my first jars of Grandma Elena's Sunshine Balm at a local farmer's market. People loved it. They loved that it was real, that the ingredients were sourced from small, sustainable farms. They loved the story. In 5 years, we'd grown from my kitchen counter to a small, dedicated workshop with 20 employees. We were in boutique health stores across the country. We were doing well, really well. We were happy. Then came the email with the subject line, acquisition inquiry from Harrington Global. I almost deleted it as spam. Harrington Global was a behemoth, a corporate giant that owned everything from airlines to tech startups. They were famous for buying up smaller companies and absorbing them into their massive, faceless machine. They were the opposite of everything Terrabloom stood for, but my business partner, Liam, insisted we take the meeting. Mia, just hear them out, he'd said, his eyes wide with the possibility. This could be it, the dream. So I found myself in that silent marble tower, sitting across a ridiculously long table from Harrison Harrington Sr., the patriarch, and his 2 children. Harrison Jr. and Catherine. Mr. Harrington Sr. was exactly what you'd expect. Silver hair, an expensive suit that fit him like a second skin, and eyes that didn't just look at you, they assessed you, valued you. He spoke in a low, rumbling voice that expected no interruptions. Harrison Jr. was slicker. A younger, more polished version of his father. He had the easy, confident smile of a man who had never been told no in his life. He did most of the talking, using corporate jargon that was clearly meant to intimidate. He talked about synergy and scaling, verticals, and optimizing brand potential. Catherine was quiet. She watched me with an unnerving stillness, her face a perfect porcelain mask. She was dressed in a way that screamed wealth without a single logo in sight. She made me feel like a child playing dress dash-up. They offered me a number that felt like a typo. $500 million. $500 million. I saw the number on the paper and my breath just stopped. I thought of my parents and the mortgage they still struggled with. I thought of my student loans, a shadow that had followed me for a decade. I thought of Liam, who had poured his life savings into our little company. I thought of the 20 people I employed, who could all have security for the rest of their lives. The deal is straightforward, Harrison Jr. said, leaning forward. We acquired Terrabloom in its entirety. You, Miss Garcia, would stay on for a 2-year transitional period as a brand consultant. You'd be very, very comfortable. What would happen to my team? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. We have our own operational teams, he said dismissively. There would be redundancies, of course. We'd handle the severance packages generously. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Redundancies. That's what he called the people who had packed boxes with me. Until 2 a.m. who believed in my grandmother's vision as much as I did. And the formulas? The sourcing? We'd need to streamline Production to make it cost-effective on a global scale, Mr. Harrington Sr. rumbled. Your artisanal methods are charming, but not scalable. The knot in my stomach tightened. Streamline. Cost-effective. They were going to take my grandmother's soul-filled recipes and turn them into chemical-laden sludge churned out by a factory. They would buy cheap ingredients from massive suppliers and slap the Terrablum name on it. They were buying the story, not the substance. I should have walked away right then. I really should have. But $500 million is a powerful spell. It makes you compromise. It makes you lie to yourself. I can protect it from the inside, I told myself. I can make sure they honor the legacy. This is a chance to bring Grandma Elena's gifts to the whole world. It was a beautiful lie. For the next 2 months, my life was a blur of lawyers and accountants. I felt like I was drowning in paperwork, in clauses and subclauses that I barely understood. The Harringtons' legal team was relentless. They were chipping away at everything that made Terrablum special, bit by bit, and wrapping it in so much legal language. I could barely see it happening. Liam was ecstatic. He was already looking at houses, planning a trip around the world. My own team was a mix of excitement and fear. They trusted me, and I told them I would protect them, that this was good for all of us. I saw the hope in their eyes, and it felt like a lead weight in my gut. The deal was set to close on a Friday. On the Wednesday before, I received an invitation. It was printed on thick, creamy cardstock that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. The Harrington family requests the pleasure of your company at a gala to celebrate the future of Harrington Global and Terrablum. It was to be held at their family estate. It's a formality, Harrison Jr. told me over the phone. A chance for our world to meet you. For us to properly welcome you to the family. That phrase, the family, sent a shiver down my spine. I spent 2 days agonizing over what to wear. I finally settled on a simple, elegant dark green dress. It was the most expensive piece of clothing I'd ever owned. When I looked in the mirror, I tried to see a woman who belonged at a billionaire's gala. I just saw Maya, a girl who smelled more like lavender than designer perfume. The Harrington estate wasn't a house. It was a kingdom. A long winding driveway, snaked through acres of perfectly manicured lawns. Fountains glittered under the evening sky. The house itself was a sprawling mansion of stone and glass that looked like it had been pulled from a magazine about the impossibly rich. A valet took my modest car, and I felt a pang of embarrassment as it drove away, looking like a toy next to the lineup of gleaming sports cars and luxury sedans. Walking in was like stepping into another universe. A string quartet was playing in the corner. Waiters in crisp uniforms moved silently through the crowd, balancing trays of champagne and impossibly tiny elaborate appetizers. The air hummed with the quiet, confident chatter of people who never had to worry about the price of anything. I felt every eye on me as I entered. They weren't hostile. Not yet. It was more like curiosity. I was the new exhibit in the zoo. The little organic skincare girl the Harringtons had bought. Catherine was the first to greet me. She glided over, a vision in shimmering silver. Maya, you came, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. That dress is very earthy. It wasn't a compliment. She guided me through the crowd, introducing me to people whose names I instantly forgot. They were all polite, all smiles, but their questions felt like tiny, probing needles. So, you make your little creams in your kitchen? One woman with a startling amount of jewelry asked. We have a professional workshop, actually, I replied, forcing a smile. It must be so quaint, she said, before turning away to grab a glass of champagne. Harrison Jr. found me by one of the massive windows overlooking the gardens. Mixing and mingling, I see, he said, putting a hand on the small of my back. It felt possessive, not friendly. Trying not to be intimidated. I'm fine, I lied. Don't worry, he said with a wink. You'll get used to how things work in the real world. The real world. As if my world, the one of hard work and passion and dirt. Under my fingernails wasn't real. The knot in my stomach was back, bigger and colder than ever. I just wanted to go home, to my small apartment that smelled like my test batches of soap. I just had to get through this night. 2 more days, and the money would be in the bank. I could endure anything for that long. That's what I told myself. The climax of the evening was the speech from Mr. Harrington Sr. A hush fell over the crowd as he stepped up to a small podium set up on the grand staircase. He looked out over the sea of wealthy, powerful faces, his guests, his subjects. Thank you all for coming, he began, his voice booming through the cavernous hall. Tonight, we celebrate the future. Harrington Global has always thrived by looking ahead, by identifying potential and acquiring it. A ripple of polite laughter went through the crowd. My hands started to feel clammy. Our latest acquisition is a charming little company called Terra Bloom. He said the name like it was something foreign and slightly amusing. It's a wonderful story. A young woman, using her grandmother's old recipes, making lotions and potions in her kitchen. He was reducing my entire life's work, my grandmother's legacy, to a fairy tale. I could feel the blood rising in my cheeks. I looked around. People were smiling, some looked patronizing, others just bored. And we saw potential in that story, he continued. It's a story our marketing department can really run with. The rustic, homespun authenticity, it sells. I felt sick. He wasn't just talking business. He was peeling back the curtain, showing everyone exactly how little he thought of me and my work. He was boasting about how they would exploit my story for profit. He then looked directly at me, a smirk playing on his lips. And we are so thrilled to have the founder, Maya Garcia, here with us tonight. He gestured for me to step forward. I felt rooted to the spot, 100 pairs of eyes turning to me. I took a half step, my legs feeling like lead. This young lady, he said, his voice dripping with condescension, has done a remarkable job with what she had. It's truly incredible what one can achieve with a few weeds from the garden and a blender. And then it happened, he chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. Harrison Jr., standing beside him, let out a loud, braying laugh. Catherine, who had been watching with that cool detachment, finally broke her composure and smiled. A cruel, sharp little smile. And like a virus, the laughter spread. It started with the people closest to the stairs, the inner circle. Then it rippled outwards. It wasn't gentle, polite laughter. It was mocking. It was the sound of people who saw me as a joke, a silly little girl playing with mud pies who had somehow stumbled into their world. They were laughing at my grandmother. They were laughing at the memory of her hands, covered in chamomile and clay. They were laughing at my passion, my years of struggle, my heart and soul which I had poured into every single jar. In that moment, everything went silent in my head. The sound of their laughter became a distant buzz. All I could see was my grandmother's face, the way she would smile at me over her mixing bowl. Respect the earth, Mia, she would say, and respect yourself. They are the same thing. The heat in my cheeks turned into an icy calm. The humiliation washed away, and in its place was a clarity so pure and so sharp it felt like a shard of glass in my chest. The $500 million vanished. It wasn't real. The mortgage, the student loans, the dream houses, they all dissolved into smoke. The only thing that was real was the raw, burning feeling of my own self-respect. And I realized in that crystal clear moment that they were trying to buy it from me. It was the last, most valuable asset I had. And the price tag on it was my signature on their contract. Mr. Harrington was still talking, but I wasn't listening. I started walking toward the staircase. Not because he had beckoned me, but because I had something to say. The crowd parted before me. Their laughter faltered as they saw the look on my face. I wasn't crying, I wasn't shrinking. I walked up the stairs with a straight back and a steady gaze, and I stopped right next to Mr. Harrington at the podium. He looked at me, surprised. The smirk still lingering on his face, I gently moved him aside and leaned into the microphone. The entire hall was dead silent now. You could hear a pin drop. "Good evening," I said. My voice didn't shake. It was as clear and calm as a winter morning. I looked out at the sea of faces, no longer intimidated. I just saw people. People who had forgotten what it meant to build something with their own two hands with love. "Mr. Harrington is right," I said, turning to look at him. His eyes widened slightly. "I did start my company with my grandmother's recipes. She taught me that the things you find in the earth, the things some people might call weeds, have power and dignity. She taught me that caring for something, nurturing it from a seed, is the most important work a person can do." I turned back to the crowd. "My company is not a charming story for your marketing department. It's not about rustic authenticity that you can sell. It's about respect, respect for the earth, respect for the traditions that came before us, and respect for the hard work of the people who helped me build it." I took a deep breath. This was it. "You are offering me an incredible amount of money," I said, my voice ringing with a strength I didn't know I possessed. "And for the last 2 months, I have been trying to convince myself that it's worth it. That it's worth handing over my grandmother's legacy to people who see it as nothing more than a line item on a balance sheet. To people who think it's funny." I looked directly at Harrison Jr., then at Catherine, then back at their father. I saw confusion, then anger dawning on their faces. "Tonight, you've made my decision very easy," I said. "Thank you for showing me who you really are. You've taught me that some things aren't for sale. My work, my grandmother's memory, my dignity, they're not for sale." I paused, letting the words hang in the suffocating silence of the room. "So, Mr. Harrington," I said, my voice dropping just a little, but carrying to every corner of the hall, "you can keep your $500 million.
And
Then I turned and walked down the stairs. I didn't run. I walked, my cheap shoes clicking loudly now on the marble floor. Every single eye in that room was on me. I didn't look at any of them. I walked straight through the crowd, which parted from me like the Red Sea, and out the massive front doors. Into the cool night air, the second the door closed behind me. Cutting off the suffocating silence, I gasped for air like I'd been underwater. I leaned against a cold stone pillar, and the tears finally came. But they weren't tears of humiliation. They were hot, angry, liberating tears. I was crying for my grandmother, for my team, for the fool I had almost been. I walked down the long driveway, my fancy dress swishing around my ankles. I didn't wait for the valet to bring my car. I just wanted to walk. When I finally reached the gate, I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I managed to dial my lawyer. It was late, but he answered on the second ring. "Mia, is everything okay?" "Kill the deal, Mark," I said, my voice thick with emotion but firm. "What? Maya, what happened?" "The closing is in less than 48 hours. "I don't care. It's over, I'm walking away. Kill it. I'll send you an email to confirm. But the money. "It's not worth it," I said, and I hung up. The next call was to Liam. It was the hardest one. He went from ecstatic to confused to furious in the space of a minute. He yelled, he begged. He told me I was insane, that I was throwing away all of our futures over a little pride. Maybe he was right from his perspective, but he hadn't been in that room. He hadn't heard that laughter. I got in my car and drove away from that kingdom of glass and stone, back to my world. The days that followed were chaos. The Harringtons were furious. Their lawyers sent threatening letters. Their PR machine went into overdrive, painting me as an unstable, emotional amateur who couldn't handle a professional negotiation. The story leaked to the business journals. Amateur founder kills $500 million deal in last-minute snit. Some people called me a fool, an idiot. But then something else happened. A small blog picked up the real story from someone who had been a waiter at the party, then another. The narrative started to shift. The hashtag dignity is not for sale started trending. Emails and messages flooded our company inbox. They were from other small business owners, from customers, from people who were tired of being swallowed by corporate giants. They called me brave. They called me a hero. My team, when I told them what happened, didn't abandon me. Our lead chemist, a quiet woman named Rosa, hugged me and said, "My grandmother also grew weeds in her garden." Thank you, Maya. We lost the chance at $500 million. We remained a small company. Liam, after a few weeks of angry silence, eventually came around. He saw the outpouring of support and realized we had something more valuable than money. A loyal community. The truth is, it wasn't easy. There were days I lay awake at night, the number $500 million flashing in my mind. And I'd wonder if I had made a terrible mistake. I could have secured my family's future forever, but then I'd go into the workshop in the morning. I'd smell the lavender and the rosemary and the clay. I'd see the passion in the eyes of my team as they carefully filled each jar. I'd pick up a jar of Grandma Elena's sunshine balm, and I would hold my grandmother's legacy in my hands, untainted and whole. And I knew, with a certainty that ran deeper than any bank account, that I had made the right choice. I was still Maya Garcia, a girl who smelled more like lavender than perfume. And I was finally truly rich.